Hey everyone, Pekin here. Just wanted to go over my current Bonney deck list. I won a locals recently with it. It's pretty fun deck list, and I got it from Card Ape, the store regional Bonney winner deck list. That's just running pretty much the Supernova package mainly. But I wanted to just show off the deck list, talk about my matchups, what I like and what I go for into the matchups, and then also get some advice if you guys are Bonney players. What packages are you running currently? Are you running more of the split searchers? I do want to try out the list that runs the baby 5 searchers for the Don Quixote Pirates. Search out that 10 drop. I feel like the 10 drop is pretty good. I do like this deck list though. Overall, the deck is a lot of fun. I might be taking this to Gen Con, my first regionals. So again, any advice you have, leave it in the comments and let me know if you've been playing Bonney, playing against Bonney, if you think the deck is fun or not. But just to get into it, you know, we've got our 5 life, 5k mono green leader. You know, for 1 Don, you can rest one of your opponent's characters or leaders when your opponent attacks. Pretty good leader. I think a lot of people were very excited for this leader, and even though it's not, you know, S tier, I think it's still a very good, very powerful deck. So to get into it, we've got our 4 searchers, just Jewelry Bonney. Again, we're running more of the Supernova package. So we've got our 1 Don searcher, rest for another Don, and rest his character, search for Supernova type characters. She can search out Bonney, which is good because we are running the 5 drop Bonney. I know a few deck lists do not run it. This one does at 3 copies, you'll see later. So it is good that she can search out herself, so we can find that. Find out our top end with Basil Hawkins, you know, our 8 drop kid. A lot of good targets in our top end for this. Unfortunately, we can't search out the 10 drop or the 9 drop Zoro, but still very good for this current deck list. We've got 3 of the 0 cost events, getting into more of our 2k counter and defensive events. You know, we do run some bricks in this deck, and we do like to be quite defensible. Again, as we play out that 8 drop kid, everybody's going to be swinging into that, obviously, so want to be able to defend that. And the trigger resting a 4 cost character can actually give you a lot of value, especially if you're going into your 10 Don turn trying to play out that 10 drop Doflamingo to freeze 3 of your opponent's characters and their leader. Because if you're going into your 10 Don turn, they might anticipate that and not swing with too many of their bodies. So if this triggers out of life, which happened for me for one of my games, it can give you more targets for that 10 drop. So pretty good trigger, but again, just another defensible card. More of our 2Ks. We've just got 2 of the Scratch Menapoos, both from the starter deck, and then EBO1, 4 copies of EBO1, 3 starter deck for me. Pretty interchangeable because they're just a 2k counter. So whichever ratio you have, again, might tweak this a bit to fit in that baby 5 Don Quixote package. Again, we're just running this for our Supernova 2k because it is searchable by our Bonney. We don't have many 2ks that aren't searchable besides our next target, Ezo. So we're running 4 Ezo, 3 Don, rest a 4 drop character. This does work with our Bartolomeo blocker that we'll get into later, resting things with our effect on our turn to cycle. And it's just a good 2k counter. Again, Ezo is probably one of the best 2k counters in green, I would say. Next, we've got 3, just 3 Rosinante blockers, the 2 drop. And this is probably my best blocker against black decks, because we can trash this character to save any of our rested characters. So if they're playing out a 8 drop Sabo to KO 2 bodies, or a 4 drop Rob Lucci to KO 2 bodies, say they're targeting your 8 drop kid and this, or just 2 of your other bodies, you can trash this card and save one of those bodies. And this does work if they target this blocker and a rested character. So say you only have your 8 drop kid on the board and this blocker, and your 8 drop kid is rested. If they target both of those characters to KO simultaneously, you can trash this card to save the 8 drop kid, save the other target. because they happen at the same time. So you get to use this effect, which is just amazing. And going to the bit I talked about Izo with the Bartolomeo blocker. This is a supernova blocker. We're running 2 copies. The effect reads when a character is rested on your turn via one of your effects, i.e. like Hody Jones, the Izo, something like that. You get to draw 1, cycle 1, like draw 1, trash 1. So good cycle. So a few things that work for this. If this is on your board, as you go to use the 8-drop kids effect, you get the cycle. However, if this is the target of the 8-drop kid and it's played out after he rests himself, you do not. So if he's on the board beforehand, you get that cycle. Then moving into more of our blockers, we've got 4 Arouge. Just a great supernova blocker. At the end of the turn, restand one of your Dawn is active. You know, obviously putting Bonney's leader ability online, and just a body that you can swing with, honestly. And searchable by our Bonney Searcher. Next, one of the best blockers in the game, Basil Hawkins, 6-drop, 7k power blocker if your leader has supernova type, and then once per turn, if this card were to be removed from the field via effects, KO, bottom decking, anything like that, you know, Katakuri, putting it to life, you can rest one of your opponent's characters instead. So if they're going to KO this blocker, they have to make sure they have no active characters on the board first. So they have to swing out at you before they try to KO this, meaning that you'll probably be able to block something with it beforehand. And again, it is a 7k body, so it is a great, you know, thing to go with go for game with. Next, we've got 4 Cavendish, probably one of the best green support cards we've gotten recently for Supernova. You know, on play, if he's on the only Cavendish on your field, you can restand 2 Dawn, and then same thing when attacking. And he's also a 6k body, so that's just amazing. Definitely helps you math out some of the Dawn plays. You know, if you're playing out that 10-drop Dofi again, that's all of your Dawn. This or the Arouge means that you get a few Dawn active, so you can still use leader building. Next, we've got 3 copies of our Jewelry Bonney, the 5-drop on play. You can either freeze one of your opponent's rested characters so they don't become active, or one of their rested Dawn. A great way to kind of throw your opponent off their curve, especially if they're, you know, Rob Lucci, Gekko Moria, Black Yellow Luffy. Even if your opponent's at 10 Dawn for Black Yellow Luffy, you know, you can throw them off that Gekko Moria leader ability turn, you know, so they'll only have 9 Dawn active. And also, if they're going to 8 Dawn, they'll only have 7 Dawn active, so they can't use Gekko Moria or Savo or Isho. So great character to throw off curve a little bit. And yellow, especially, you know, with any of the 9-drop Yamato or the Rush Ace, throw them off of that a little bit. Next, getting into our top end, we've got 3 8-drop Captain Kidd. One of the best defensive cards in the game, and why we can feel pretty safe taking our life if we have this in hand or search it out pretty early and have a blocker to play off of it. We do need pretty much either 9 Dawn or 10 Dawn, depending on what other characters we have on board, because he's 8 Dawn to play out, and then for his leader ability, for his ability, 1 Dawn attached to him means that if he's rested, your opponent cannot attack any other character besides use his Kidd. So he essentially is a 8k blocker that blocks everything. Like, they have to swing into him no matter what. They can't choose to swing into life. And then you can activate main, rest him, and then play out a 3 or less, which is, you know, our Rosinante blocker, the Bartolomeo, a few choices to play out with that. But the reason why I say we have to have 9 or 10 Dawn is because we need that extra Dawn for his ability, you know, making that 9. And then if we want 1 for leader ability, that's our either... If we have Cavendish on board, we can play this out on 8, get 2 back with swing with Cavendish, use 1 for this, and then 1 for leader ability. Or if we have 9 Dawn, we can use the 8 and then the extra 1 for his ability. And then if we have a Rouge or again Cavendish, something like that, we can resend 1 for Bonney's ability. But again, yeah, one of our better top ends. It's the only top end that we can really search out with the Bonney Searcher, which is why I kind of want to see how it can fit in more of the Rosinante or Don Quixote package with this. We've got 3 10-drop Dofis, freeze 3 characters or 2 characters and a leader on play, and then just a 10k body. Really good for stalling out games. Honestly, whenever I play against black decks, I don't really want to go for their board so much most of the time, but freezing their characters always feels good, because if you KO one of their characters, they can most likely just recur that from trash via Rebecca or Gecko Moria, something like that, to get that on-play effect again, get more value. This just stalls out the game so that you can establish more of your board, and just works really well. Again, I would like to try out a build that has the Baby 5 searchers to search this out, or possibly put this to 4, depending. It does feel really good to have this on board. There's a lot of times where I feel like I could make much better plays if I had just 1 in hand. But moving on, we've got 2 copies of the 9-cost Zoro. Activate main, you can restand him for 2 Dawn, and then when attacking, you can rest a Dawn, restand him again. So essentially, he can swing 3 times. One of our best top end, because it just allows us to either clear board or go for game very effectively. And it's a 9-drop, so if we're on 10 Dawn, we can still leave 1 up for leader ability. It is probably one of my favorite cards for the mirror matchup, along with this next card, Hoodie Jones, because yes, they can rest him once, but you can still get 2 swings of 9k with him, and then they can't use anything else, like they can't rest anything else. You know, Bonney can only rest 1 thing at a time. So if we're in a mirror matchup, this is probably one of the best ways we can clear board or go for game, because although they can rest 1 of his swings, he still gets 2 swings out per turn, which is great. Copying that with our next card, and our last card, for Hoodie Jones, probably one of the best cards for mirror matchup with that 9-cost Zoro. On play, he gets Rush. He's an 8k body. You take the top card from your life to your hand, and then you can rest either 2 of your opponent's cards or their Dawn. So if you're going against the mirror matchup, you can rest 1 of their blockers and their Dawn, so they can't use leader ability if they only had 1 Dawn up. Against red decks, you can rest any active Dawn they might have left up for Radical Beam. It's a great way to go for game, and also we can play this out on curve sometimes. You know, Bonney 5 health leader and a lot of 2Ks that are searchable. It is possible that if we have this in our hands starting off, and you know you might want to clear board, play this out just on curve, it's not horrible to take your life if you're sitting around like 4 or 3, depending on your opponent's board. I've done that a few times, especially in the mirror matchup, just to clear board safely and not too worried about my life, depending on how healthy you are in the game state. Again, I'm not the best player. Honestly, I would love any advice on the deck and how you guys been piloting it. I would love to try out a build that has the Baby 5 Searcher, but that's the deck list I've been running. Again, it's from Card Ape. I'll have a picture on the screen of the sim with the full deck list, and I'll have a copy of the deck list that you can just copy over to the sim if you want to try it out for yourself. You know, Bonney feels like a deck that wants to stall out the game via leader ability, via our blockers, the fact that we're 5 health, until we get to a point where we have enough big bodies on the board that we can go for game. And I feel like splitting a few cards out here to fit in the Baby 5 Searcher can really help, because again, we can't target most of our top end with this. Even with the Baby 5 Searcher, a lot of our top end is either, you know, Hoodie Jones or Zoro. So it really just targets that 10-drop Dofi, but being able to search out both the 8-drop Captain Kid and the 10-drop Dofi feels pretty good. Again, I'm no expert. I'm no professional player. I haven't topped at any regionals. I'm going to my first regional at Gen Con, so any advice you have for the deck, I would greatly appreciate. Again, this list is from Card Ape. Getting into my matches, I played first a mirror matchup. Mirror matchup, you're going to depend on your top end that you see. Again, Hoodie Jones really helps out. I had 2 of them and a 9-drop Zoro that I had on the board. Going against the mirror matchup, there's not too much you can do against that 9-drop Zoro. Like, you're going to get hit twice by it, most likely. And then the following turn, my opponent played out the 10-drop Dofi to freeze my Hoodie and 9-drop Zoro, but Zoro can just restand himself from that. It does, you know, take up one of the activate main, so 2 Dawn, made it so I could go for game. So first match against the mirror matchup of Bonney, just looked for my top end cards. Next, I went against Lucci, and I feel like with Lucci, our Basil Hawkins is just such a crucial card. It takes so much for Lucci to KO this, because in set 7 currently, there's not too much that I feel like the Lucci lists are running in terms of KOing via events or via character swings. You know, I think they have the Thriller Bark Luffy that trashes, I think, a 2 cost or a 3 cost or less. And then they have Brook, which, you know, these are things they'll have to swing out with the rest of their board first before they KO via those characters, because that would have to be the last character they swing with. Because if, again, there's any other active characters, any trash effects, we can just rest that character to negate. So the fact that they only have Finger Pistol, which I think KOs a 5 or less, which, you know, it does get it in pretty good range with just their leader swing, but leaving 1 Dawn up to rest something like that Brook or the Luffy or just another character. So they have to swing out with leader first, and most likely we'll just be able to block out with this. Still get a lot of value from this. Again, some of our top end, the Zoro, I feel like Lucci can just KO pretty easily. You know, if you see stage and leader swing, that's immediately -3 cost, putting him to 6. That gets him, you know, pretty easy to KO. And then if you play that out and they just KO it the following turn, there goes your entire 9 drop. I love seeing the 10 drop against Lucci. Again, if you can freeze the leader, that's immediately no more free -1 with a swing, and they don't get to fill up their trash if they're looking for something to bring out with a Gecko or Rebecca. And then freezing any of their cards rather than KOing, I feel like is the better option, because they don't get those cards back from trash, getting more value from them. Again, I feel like as much of a stall deck as Bonney is, when I'm going against Lucci, I feel like the best course of action is just to try to apply pressure quickly, you know? So I'm most likely going to try to swing with my Hawkins when I feel safe to. Of course, they might just stack a bunch of Dawn to try and KO the Hawkins, but again, we have a ton of 2Ks that are searchable, a ton of other blockers, and the 0 cost events, of course. So if they're just stacking a bunch of Dawn to swing into the Hawkins, I don't mind that as well, because that means they're playing out less characters, of course. And then we have the 4 Hodies to rest their blockers, Sabo or Rebecca's. Again, just trying to apply pressure quickly, because they'll probably KO most of our characters. We do play a good amount of big bodies, so they'll have to at least give us a lot of resources, you know, a few Tempest Kicks to try and KO some of this stuff. And again, it is a bit trickier to get rid of the Hawkins. I feel like if they see their stage quickly, though, it does become a bit of an issue, but that's any Lucci matchup, I think, against any deck. You know, you're hoping that they just don't see their stage. And then my final matchup was against an Ivankov. You might not play against too many Ivankovs, but it is, you know, a deck that you can probably do pretty well with at locals. I know a few lists have been running around with the new Inazuma that draws you 2 cards if your hand size, I think, is less than 2 or 3, which couples well with Ivankov's leader ability. I think if you have no cards in hand with the leader ability, if you draw 2 and then Inazuma draws you another 2, so if you have no cards in hand, you go back up to 4. Makes it pretty hard to, you know, pressure their hand size. So a lot of MVPs from that game were my Hawkins. Again, they have to swing out completely if they're going to use Gravity Blade, which means that they won't have too much Dawn to attach. They do play a lot of 7 and 8 power bodies, so still not too many free blocks with this, but if they're going to bottom deck it, they have to swing out first, similar with Lucci. So we'll most likely get some value from the block. And then also our resting cards, you know, Julie Bonney and the 10 drop Dofi definitely help a lot. Keeping their board frozen means that we can apply pressure at our own pace. I really do like how this deck plays with more focus on the Supernova rather than splitting it between the Baby 5, the Don Quixote, and the Supernova. But I do like a bit of the ability to search out the 10 drop. I feel like it's very good for any Lucci matchup, and even the mirror somewhat. Again, if they have the 9-drop Zoro, it doesn't matter too much because it can restand itself, but just having a 10k body out really helps going for game. And there are a lot of turns where I can play this out the following turn. I can play out a Hody, and depending if I have a Cavendish out, you know, that's a ton of bodies and it's still a lot of Dawn, you know. Playing out Hody, you normally have that 3 Dawn left over, but if you play out Hody, then swing with Cavendish, you got 5 Dawn back up to help you go for game. Some great combos. This deck is a lot of fun with how efficient you can be with your Dawn via Cavendish and via a Rouge restanding a Dawn. For another example, if you're on 8 Dawn, you can play out Cavendish for 5, leaving you 3 Dawn active. But with Cavendish's on play, you restand 2 of those Dawn, meaning you have 5 more, so you can play out Bonney, freeze one of their characters or their Dawn, and then if you have an Rouge out, you know, perfect scenario, you might not always have this curve of the Rouge out, but if you have that Rouge out, you still get that Dawn restanded for lead ability, and you just got out 2 5-drop bodies for 8 Dawn. So a lot of great Dawn efficient plays you can be looking for with this deck. Again, let me know if you have any advice, anything that you've been doing differently, if you've tested out the Baby 5 Searcher package for Bonney, if you like that more than this one. I just think the deck's a lot of fun. I wanted to talk about my mindset going into a few of the matches and wanted any feedback. Again, I'm not a super knowledgeable player. I just go to my locals and I'm preparing for my first regionals at Gen Con. So any advice you've got, again, this list is from Card Ape. I can't say this enough. This is not my original list. All credit goes to Card Ape for this list. Been pretty fun. Again, I do want to either test out the Bonney, the Baby 5 Searcher, or just maybe fit in one more 10-drop if I was going to keep more of the Supernova package. Definitely could probably find some space to cut for just one more 10-drop just to find it a bit more consistently, even though I can't search for it. But yeah, that was my time at locals, and that's my thoughts on Bonney so far. Really fun deck, and I'm looking forward to playing it more. So again, leave me any feedback down in the comments, any advice, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.